time for another Caldecott book. This one is called Drummer Hoff. It was adapted by Barbara Emberley and illustrated by Ed Emberley. And this is the Caldecott book for 1968. Drummer Hoff. Drummer Hoff fired it off. Private Parridge brought the carriage, but Drummer Hoff fired it off. Corporal Farrell brought the barrel. Corporal Farrell brought the barrel. Private Parridge brought the carriage, but Drummer Hoff fired it off. Sergeant Chowder brought the powder. Sergeant Chowder brought the powder. Corporal Farrell brought the barrel. Private Parridge brought the carriage, but Drummer Hoff fired it off. Captain Bammer brought the rammer. Captain Bammer brought the rammer. Sergeant Chowder brought the powder. Corporal Farrell brought the barrel. Private Parridge brought the carriage, but Drummer Hoff fired it off. Major Scott brought the shot. Major Scott brought the shot. Captain Bammer brought the rammer. Sergeant Chowder brought the powder. Corporal Farrell brought the barrel. Private Parridge brought the carriage, but Drummer Hoff fired it off. General Border gave the order. General Border gave the orders. Major Scott brought the shot. Captain Bammer brought the rammer. Sergeant Chowder brought the powder. Corporal Farrell brought the barrel. Private Parridge brought the carriage, but Drummer Hoff fired it off. Fire! Kaboom! The end. Called Daring to Dig, Adventures of Women in American Paleontology. It's written by Beth Stricker and illustrated by Alana McGillis. Now, this book has a lot of information in it, so I'm just going to share some of the highlights, and you'll have to come borrow it from our library and come back and read some of the details. Daring to Dig. Fossils are the remains of past living things usually preserved in rock. Paleontologists are scientists who uncover and study these clues to learn about life long ago. Thomas Jefferson, 3rd President of the United States, was one of America's first paleontologists. He studied fossils from the giant ground sloth to the enormous mastodon. Since then, paleontologists have explored Earth's mysteries. Most paleontologists have been men. There were many reasons for this, but the biggest was that many men did not think women should have jobs, go to college, or become scientists. Often they discouraged women from chasing their dreams. A few women broke these rules and pursued their passion. With support from their families, some went to college. If they were offered a job afterwards, they earned less than men. Over time, several bold, smart women created their own paths to paleontology and became role models for others. Despite facing discrimination, women have shaped our understanding of the history of life on Earth. These stories highlight some of the biggest adventures of their careers. So if you dare, let's dig in. The first one is Annie Alexander. In 1903, adventurer Annie Alexander was on an expedition in Shasta County, California with a group of friends. The team uncovered the bones of a prehistoric creature with paddle-like arms and legs. Look at all the information that's on this page. It was a marine reptile they found. With money from her father's successful business and her own wise investments, Annie could afford to travel the world and donate specimens and funds to the University of California. She and her friend Louise donated more than 20,000 fossils and modern plants and animals to the university's collection. Wow. Mignon Talbot. One morning, Mignon was out for a stroll with her sister Ellen near Holyoke, Massachusetts. They passed a hill of gravel, and Mignon noticed a large piece of sandstone streaked with white. She stopped to take a closer look and discovered a fossil. The fossil was incomplete and most of the skull was missing, but Mignon examined the evidence and published a paper about her discovery in 1911. The dinosaur would have walked on 2 feet and was the same height as a chicken, though much longer. And lots of information on these pages, too. The next one is Carlotta Mallory. Carlotta loved traveling. In 1916, she headed to the Dominican Republic to collect a variety of fossils and learn about the age of the rock around them. Many of these fossils had not been given a name yet. She and her team arrived in the midst of a revolution, but that didn't stop them. Look at all this. That summer, Carlotta found out that another group of scientists planned to publish about these new fossils. Whoever finished first would get the credit. The race was on. For months she worked, writing 300 pages with 40 illustrations. She and her professor, Gilbert Harris, published her writings just before the other team. Julia Gardner. In 1944, the world was at war. Allied forces pushed the Germans east from France. American troops held off Japanese armies in the Pacific. Meanwhile, the Japanese floated hundreds of dangerous balloons over western North America. Each one carried a bomb. Julia had to figure out where they were coming from. Julia and her team in the MGU collected sandbags from unexploded bombs. She examined the sand used as ballast and observed that there were no bits of coral in it. That meant that the balloons were being launched from a beach northeast of Sendai, Japan. Wonder how she figured that out. Winifred Goldring. In 1924, Winifred was teaching classes at Wellesley College when she was invited to come work for the New York State Museum. After 2 years as a scientific expert, Winifred undertook a massive project, a book about the state's Devonian crinoids. Over the years, scientists had collected notes, drawings, and specimens, but none had completed the project. Winifred continued to collect and organize information. After 7 years, she published a detailed book on the topic. Look at all this. That book was 670 pages long. Esther Applin. At the 1921 meeting of the Paleontological Society, Esther presented revolutionary research. She suggested a new way of finding oil based on the age of tiny fossils found nearby. Older scientists dismissed the notion, but not for long. Esther worked closely with her friends Alva and Hedwig. They collected information to show that microfossils were useful in stratigraphy and correlation. In 1925, they published a paper that proved this new method could be done and had been done before. And they helped find oil. Catherine Palmer. As director of the Paleontological Research Institution, Catherine had bold ideas about finding, organizing, and studying invertebrate fossils. By the late 1950s, the institution's collections and activities had outgrown their home near Cornell University. Catherine made ambitious plans for the future. Catherine spent less time on scientific research after becoming the director, but her new work helped others make discoveries. She improved the library, the research lab, storage of the fossils, and more. She also became an enthusiastic educator for the people of Ithaca, New York. Tilly Edinger. In 1940, Tilly stepped off a ship onto the busy streets of New York City. As a Jewish woman, the past few years had been terrifying for her. She had been an unpaid curator in a German museum when strict Nazi laws forced her into hiding. Tilly found temporary safety in London until sailing for the United States on the SS Britannic. Tilly embraced her new life in Boston. She found that American paleontological sites held the remains of extinct horses. Tilly spent 10 years collecting endocasts of these brains and studying them. She wrote an important book on the evolution of the horse brain. Mary Dawson. There is rock beneath Ellesmere Island in the Canadian Arctic that is 55 million years old. Mary read a report on the geology of the region and thought that there might be fossils preserved in the rock. In 1973, she and her team made the long journey to the island. Mary's fieldwork uncovered evidence that the region had been a warm, frost-free swampland 55 million years ago. Fossils showed that mammals had traveled from North America to Europe on land that no longer exists. Her work provided support for the theory of plate tectonics. Karen Chin. Paleontologists search for fossils clues to life long ago. Some fossils are shells, some are bones, and some are footprints. Deep in the rolling hills of northwest Montana, Karen uncovered a special treasure, coprolites, fossilized poop. After she collects fossils in the field, Karen heads back to the lab to learn more. She sometimes uses high-tech tools to examine the coprolites and find evidence about the environment in which they were made. Clues within the coprolites tell us what life was like on Earth millions of years ago. Len James. Hundreds of years ago, prehistoric humans settled on islands in the Pacific Ocean, including Hawaii. These people affected their environment so quickly that a huge number of birds went extinct. What happened? Helen was determined to find out. Since 1976, Helen has worked with scientist Doris Olson to identify fossil birds. Eventually, they realized that the islands held a huge number of undescribed fossils. The two made their careers documenting these species and the role humans played in the birds' extinction. Phoebe Cohen. In the late 1970s, scientists discovered some of the oldest known fossils in the world. At the time, these tiny fossils were thought to be between 520 million to 800 million years old. 30 years later, graduate student Phoebe took another look at these strange specimens. Phoebe uses fossil clues to piece together what life was like more than 800 million years ago. How did life go from being single-celled to multicellular? If she can learn how living things first evolved on Earth, then she can help scientists identify similar situations in other solar systems. And here's some more. Earth is more than 4.5 billion years old, and for the last 4 billion of those years, it supported life. Our planet has a vast history, especially compared to the brief amount of time humans have lived here. It can be tough to visualize just how long ago different plants and animals lived. This map of geologic time helps us picture the immensely long history of life. What we know about Earth's history has changed with each new discovery. The people who make these discoveries have changed too. Despite discrimination, the field has become more diverse. As more women of all backgrounds dare to dig, their discoveries will bring us closer to piecing together the full history of life on Earth. And if you want to know more, make sure you check out this book from our library, Daring to Dig, Adventures of Women in American Paleontology. Thank you.